This is the Wealth Standard Radio, your gold standard in everything financial.
Hi, everyone. This is Patrick, and welcome to the Wealth Standard Podcast. This is episode 214, and I have the special experience of interviewing Jason Hartman. Jason Hartman is the host of the Creating Wealth show. He's been on the podcast in the past. We have these fascinating, scintillating conversations. He is a very educated, very read individual. He interviews so many people. I have no idea how he does it. He has, he has over 900 episodes on the Creating Wealth show. And he has, another 10 podcasts. He's done thousands and thousands of interviews, and he really has gotten to the point where he understands wealth. He understands the criteria for it. He understands the personality. He has such a wide network, and I love talking to him. And this past year, it's been over a year now. I've been part of his Venture Alliance, and the Venture Alliance is just a mastermind group. There's only probably 30 people, and we've gone to different parts of the country. We have gone as far as Dubai on the very first trip. Anyway, it's been really a pleasure and a huge blessing for me to get to know him and to learn from him and to have discussions with him as well as that group. And really what we're talking about today is something I've discussed before on the podcast, but I think that as we're going to the end of the year, the fourth quarter, we're evaluating what we did this year. We're looking back on how we started the year. And we talk really about how to set the stage and what are those characteristics that create success, create wealth, and more importantly, how do you start off your year, and what are some things you can do to ensure that you have the motivation, the tools, the network to reach those milestones you're trying to set for yourself that you want to achieve. And that's where the Meet the Masters event came from. This is Jason's 20th year, so we talk about that event, which is on January 12th to the 14th. I'm going to be speaking there, and it's a 3-day event. I was there last year. And this is what I would say, and I'll end with this so we can get into the interview, because it was supposed to be a half-an-hour interview, and it turned into a lot longer than that, which is no surprise, especially with Jason. But I would say that I look back on the events and the conferences that I've attended, and I can reverse engineer literally millions and millions of dollars just from a conference. Now, it's not the material that you learn necessarily, although that's part of it. It's the people that you meet. It's the optimism, the success that is there. It stretches you to be bigger and better than you are right now. And I had that a couple episodes back when I went through the dinner that I had with Tim Ferriss. Jason was also a part of that. That dinner in and of itself stretched my understanding of what was possible for me. And without that dinner, there's some things I wouldn't have done that I've done. And maybe I would have done them later down the road. But I would say that when we get around people that are doing amazing things, that they're pushing the limits, they're doing the atypical, they're going above and beyond their fears and anxieties, it's empowering. And those events may not be virtual all the time. It may not be listening to information or reading a book. It's being around a group of people in that type of network. And so what comes from network is, again, as I said before, optimism. It comes, there becomes this new bar that's set for you that you can try to achieve. And I always associate, the idea of the 4-minute mile with Roger Bannister. And the thing is, it's the person that came second. Nobody knows what that is. But the person that came second saw that it was possible and then pushed the limits. And then when it comes down to your network, potential investment partners, potential investment ideas, maybe ideas to with a situation you're involved in, maybe there's some answers there, people that have gone through the same thing. Anyway, an event, especially at the beginning of the year, is vital. And that's where I would say if you can stretch and you can make this event, definitely going to be worth your while. There are going to be some really cool speakers there. And we also have a discount for Paradigm Life and also the Wealth Standard listeners. And so I'm going to put that link in the show notes as well as the email. So check that depending on how you access this podcast. All right, that's it. I hope you guys are having an amazing fall, had a happy Halloween, and I hope you enjoy the interview with Jason Hartman. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this week. I have a very special guest, and he is no stranger to the show. It's none other than the Jason Hartman. Jason, how you doing today?
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me. I must say, I didn't know we were doing video. I am wearing my Halloween costume. Well, part of it here. Look. Yes, Superman.
As I told you when I saw that, very fitting, fitting for you, and then Coco.
Well, my dog has a Supergirl outfit, so I figured I had to match her. Kind of, this is not actually my Halloween costume. I was at Ken McElroy's Halloween party the other night. Cool. He's the Rich Dad advisor, Rich Dad author, and I had a completely different costume at that party. But this is not an actual costume. And then, of course, I look like a total deadbeat today. I was just doing office work. So thanks for having me.
We're going to get into quite a bit today. I really wanted to interview you and focus on your upcoming event, which is Meet the Masters. This is your 20th anniversary. It's an event that you put on once a year, but looking at this year, given the anniversary, but also some of the speaker lineup you have, I wanted to explore really your kind of reasoning behind it and what you think the attendees will get out of it, and kind of maybe gravitate into where you think 2008 is going to land as far as real estate is concerned. So let's get into all those topics.
I think you meant to say 2017, right?
Well, Meet the Masters is 2018, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Yes. I thought you said 2008. I apologize.
No.
Yeah, because that's probably when we started Meet the Masters. This is our 20th anniversary event. We used to do it twice a year, and we stopped because it's just too much work. So we've probably been doing this event for 10, 11 years now, I'm guessing. And it's everybody loves this event. People fly in from all over the world, certainly all over the country, but we've always had a few come in from Japan and Europe and Australia and so forth. And it's a great event because, our property managers come in and speak to our audience. Our local market specialists come in. Last year was the first time we ever had a paid speaker. Of course, you were there. That was G. Edward Griffin, who's the author of the famous book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, fantastic book about the Federal Reserve and the monetary and the banking system. But this year, we are really kicking it up because it's our 20th anniversary. So we are really doing some great hired speakers in addition to, myself, all of the local market specialists, property management teams, lenders, so people can get firsthand advice and they can meet all these people. Our investors like to invest without geographical limitation. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they want to be able to invest in the markets that make sense regardless of where they're located. And those usually aren't located in the places in which they live. And so they never meet a lot of these people from around the country that are helping them build their portfolios. And so that's what this event is designed for, to let them meet all of those people. But we have celebrity speakers at this event, and we have one big one that remains to be announced. The contract is right here, and I'm just about to sign it. So I hope people couldn't see the type on the contract because I can't announce that person yet. But that person is extremely big deal, and we have a lot of fans of this person. But I'll just share my screen with you for just a moment and show you the lineup so far in terms of what we have, and that is right here. So you can see here we have Brian Smith. He's the founder of UGG Boots. He basically took a shoestring company and turned it into a $1 billion brand. So that was pretty amazing. We have Garrett Sutton. He's one of the Rich Dad advisors. You know Garrett very well. Mm-hmm. And he's the author of several books, 6 books actually, and a few of them in the Rich Dad series. He's an attorney. He helps people with asset protection, estate planning. He's really the leader of his field. His advice would cost many hundreds of dollars per hour. So you can meet him, hang out with him. We're going to have him at one of the VIP dinners. He's great. This is his third time speaking at Meet the Masters. Danielle DiMartino Booth, she's the founder of Money Strong and a full-time columnist for Bloomberg View. And she is also a former advisor to the Federal Reserve. And what's interesting about Danielle DiMartino Booth is that she is kind of rogue, even though she was with the Federal Reserve. She speaks her mind about the system, and it's scammy and bad elements to the system. And then we have Andrew Zatlin. He's known as the Moneyball economist. He's a fantastic forecaster. He talks a lot about interest rates and the real estate market and so forth. John Burns, who really is one of the definite leaders in the field. He consults to all of the big home builders and real estate developers, D.R. Horton, Pulte, Lennar, all the big names, they're building tens of thousands of homes every year across the country. And he's a leading research and forecasting expert in real estate, John Burns Real Estate Consulting founder. So those are sort of some of our kind of celebrity type speakers so far. We've got another big one, maybe two, that are going to join the lineup here. But then we've got all of our teams and our local market specialists and our property managers and the mortgage people that can help with financing and so forth. So it's going to be a phenomenal event. We added a day because the lineup is so packed. So we've got 3 days. Yeah. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, January 12th, 13th, and 14th in La Jolla, California. Beautiful property, first class hotel accommodations. We've got a great room block rate where people can get in really inexpensively for their hotel, as well as early bird ticket pricing. So,
well, Jason, you look at the lineup that you have, and I would say it's a kind of a mix between the financial philosophy side of things, the entrepreneur philosophy, but then you also have the practical side of things, which is your actual investment providers, your local real estate market experts. They're traveling anywhere from Indianapolis to Mississippi to
Atlanta,
other parts of the Midwest.
Right.
So I'd ask you, as you look at these speakers specifically, and as you're preparing for the event, what is it? What is kind of your mission around what you want the attendee to accomplish while they're there? Like, what type of experience do you hope that the person that hasn't come before receives?
Right. That's a great question. So this is a very practical event. There's no selling. It's not a pitch fest. We're in the business. We're a real estate brokerage. So we actually help people buy properties. And one of the things that people have constantly told me that they absolutely love about our live events, and we do maybe 5-6 live events per year, sometimes more, but this is our biggest one. And this is the only one where we get all these experts together. That's why we call it Meet the Masters. What people really get out of it is they don't get a pie in the sky, sales pitch. You can do anything, a lot of unrealistic expectations. It seems like virtually every real estate or financial seminar out there, they're filling your head with a bunch of crazy expectations. Our event, since we actually provide properties people can buy, unlike just selling info products or overpriced coaching programs or things like that, where, there's no connection between the promises, that you say and the actual investments people get. Okay. Ours have to match up because we're actually providing the real properties. Like, people at this event, they can buy properties, and the numbers and the metrics that we talk about have to actually come true in real life. These properties actually have to perform. So you don't have to go out and find the properties yourself. It's just a whole different type of business. And that's what people say that they really love. They love the networking. They love talking to our clients. I mean, we'll have clients at this event that have been investing with us for, 8-10 years now. And you can have lunch with them. You can talk with them firsthand, have coffee with them at the event and hear their experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's a very realistic event. It's a very grounded event. I've been to so many conferences, Pat, and I know you have too, where it's just pie in the sky. It's just bullshit. Okay.
Well, yeah.
I hate to swear, but that's what it is. A lot of these events they're just scams. This is a real event where you can do all the stuff we talk about, in real life, and you can do it easily. You don't have to go hunting around neighborhoods to find properties. And, we provide all that.
So Jason, what I would say is you've interviewed a lot of people. I think your main podcast is almost at like 900. I mean,
we're over 900 episodes on that show, on the Creating Wealth show, and over 4,000 episodes in my entire podcast network. I have learned a lot talking to all those people like yourself.
This is what I want to ask the question, which is, so everyone has a bias and looking at, I mean, that's just the fact of life. All humans have it, and they come to it for a variety of reasons. But what I've experienced is that once they come to it, whenever there's the probability of it being disproven, right, or there being another opinion, there always becomes this like battle. So as you've experienced so many different opinions, so many different perspectives on finance, on money management, on monetary policy, fiscal policy, what politicians are doing, what the government is doing, what the markets are doing. Like how do you go into an interview and really start to ask the right questions to learn, as opposed to getting a person's hyperbole?
Well, you've got to ask them how things work in real life. And my podcast, for example, and people will see this from the stage at the Meet the Masters event, it's not about the guest. It's not about the speaker. It's not about them. It's about the audience. The audience is what we're in business for. And so, I don't mind asking tough questions and pinning these people down and not letting them get away with these half-baked answers. Again, everybody can make mistakes. They can make wrong predictions for sure. But, it's just pinning them down to something that's realistic and that actually works in real life.
But at the same time, you look at, and that's what I was assuming you were going to answer, and adding to that, if you look at the experience of an individual, oftentimes they'll see someone on stage, they'll hear somebody on a podcast, they'll listen to you, and it's kind of like they, instead of forming their own opinion, they adopt the opinion of that person speaking, whether it's good, whether it's correct, incorrect, whether it's partial. Yeah. And so looking at, all of the news that exists today, all of the advice that exists today, you've still settled on this idea of investing with a specific asset class in a certain way, regardless of what you've seen as far as investment innovation, investment ideas, and so forth. So why don't you kind of walk our listeners through this, which is, you're bringing all these different speakers talking about the economy, talking about building a business, talking about legal issues, and you're bringing in local market specialists. Like, why haven't you gone outside of really your zone? I mean, you explore a lot, right? You explore so many different topics. You have so many different guests. They're all dynamic, but yet you still have kind of clung to this asset class, regardless of what you've seen out there. And I think that's very, very unique relative to the other shows that are out there, which I love, because you go in all sorts of directions as far as your guests are concerned. I mean, you have a lot of different topics as well as that are through other podcasts, but specifically Creating Wealth one. Like, why haven't you? Have you ever been you felt like you needed to?
Definitely get tempted. I mean, I think the thing is, there's a quote, and I can't remember the exact quote. It's something like to the effect of, when it comes to matters of fashion, go with the wind, go with the flow. But when it comes to matters of principle, stand like a rock. Okay. And
Love that.
My investment philosophy that I really created back in about 2004, about 13 years ago, most of it, the core of it came from about 2004, 2005. And, I just wanted to outline some deep, never changing principles that kind of guide everything right now. They all apply and they'll morph a little bit over the years, but the base core concepts like my 10 commandments of successful investing, that doesn't change. That just works. It doesn't matter what the market is doing, what the economy is doing, what the latest fad is. These are principles. They're just absolute so far, at least. It hasn't been a millennia yet, obviously, but they seem to be pretty darn consistent no matter what. There are all kinds of things that tempt us as investors and entrepreneurs, right? Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, whatever the latest fad is, the tulip bubble, in Holland. These things are, you hear all these stories, the stock market doing this. That's like that John D. Rockefeller quote from years ago. He knew the Great Depression was coming when his shoeshine boy was giving him stock advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all this kind of stuff. Everybody's like susceptible to these fads. And I just don't want to be susceptible to them. And I think, listen, I'd love, like with the cryptocurrency thing, I've said it before many times, I'd love nothing more than to be wrong about this, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong. And it's hard to say that when you see the kind of money people are making, but they can lose it in a day just as fast. And you can't forget that. So over the years, I've just become a lot more conservative as an investor. I just don't like to lose money. I've lost enough of it in my life and learned a lot of hard lessons. And it's just hard to earn it back. So if you're at the point in your life where you want something stable and consistent and reliable, this is the event for you. This is the philosophy for you. It just works. It works decade in and decade out. Just buying conservative quality properties that follow along with my 10 commandments of successful investing, that use my risk evaluator model based on land to improvement ratio, or LTI ratio. This is something I invented. And it took me 19 years to discover that. So there are some kind of core things in our philosophy. And, we morph and change a little bit, but not a lot. It's a pretty consistent thing.
Yeah, and I would say, again, going to values and principles, right? They're determined or created, or just, I guess you could say, discovered by those trials. And sometimes what a person does consider as a principle or a value, it can be tested and fail, which now it becomes kind of a theory or an idea in a sense. Mm-hmm. So looking at, your 10 commandments of investing, we won't go through those right now. I think we did that on the very first podcast we did together. But it really comes down to, looking at the market cycles, looking at how things are innovating. It comes down to, real estate still being one of those staple things that everybody needs to survive. They need a place to stay. And really looking at how our demographics have shifted, it's just presented a lot of opportunities given that, and the demand for renting, and also with how low interest rates are. But again, you have to pick and choose the different markets. And one of the things you mentioned a few minutes ago was the fact that in a lot of cities, a lot of urban areas, they're simply the numbers don't make any sense. It may make sense there, but as far as buying for income producing purposes, it doesn't. And I think those type of markets they're slowly kind of contracting to an extent.
Cash flow is very reliable. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's very reliable. Whereas appreciation is not reliable at all. I've never met anybody in all these years in the business that can reliably predict the cycles of appreciation and depreciation. And that's why you've just got to follow commandment number 5. Thou shalt not gamble. The property must make sense the day you buy it, or you simply don't buy it. And that's, one core of our investing philosophy. And so that's, what people will see. They will see at this event, they will see properties that look like that, okay? That work like that make sense the day you buy them and are very reliable in terms of the cycle. Stephen Covey, who's one of my favorite authors, the late Stephen Covey, he used to talk about something. I just loved his body of work. He wrote, of course, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, First Things First, and many other books, Principle-Centered Leadership. And he used to talk about the law of man and the law of the farm. Okay, and I'm sure you've read his work, Pat. Mm-hmm. And the law of man is that you can take shortcuts, that you can cheat, that you can hack. And, some things can be hacked a little bit. Okay, I agree with that. There's a whole movement called biohacking, right? And, it's not totally proven yet, but, people are attempting to hack the system, to beat the system, right? And the example that Stephen Covey uses is, he said, he had a PhD, right? So he talked about when he was in college, in undergrad, he could cram for an exam and pass the next day, and he'd be okay, right? He could cram right before, kind of be flaky all semester, not study much, and then just cram, and he'd be okay, right? But when he got into grad school, he said it was like a whole different level. Okay. He couldn't cram like that. He had to learn the material all along the way. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a farm and the way farmers work, right, you can't hack that you can hack it a little bit. Look at Monsanto, right? But that's another discussion. But you got to plant the seeds at a certain time and harvest them at another time, right? You can't do it the night before, right? If you try to do it the night before, you're not going to have a crop, okay? You've got to plant the seeds, and you've got to be patient and work with the law of nature, right? And the law of man isn't that way. And you can't, in some things, you just can't take shortcuts, okay? And all the law of man people are the people that are making money in markets like Los Angeles and New York City and Boston and South Florida. And just remember, those markets suffered terribly during the Great Recession, much worse than any of the markets we recommend that are more the law of nature markets. They're the linear, consistent markets. You put your money in, you manage your properties, and things just work over time. The people that are into the latest gold rush, the latest gimmick, the cryptocurrencies, the Bitcoin, that's the law of man, okay? Everything will have its day and its season under the sun. And, what goes up must come down. So
it's kind of more the law of the shiny object too.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Shiny object. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all human beings, we're trying to be more efficient. We're trying to do more with less. We see things that shine, and we want to be a part of that. We get a rise out of it. But in the end, I would say that, that's the first time I've heard you speak of that before. And even though, here in Utah, Stephen Covey, this is his stomping ground. Yeah. But it resonated, because if you look at, you really look at the strategy associated with not only buying in the right areas that have the right demand, where the metrics make sense, where it is principles based. It's also a different type of investment relative to the typical one. And it's not an accumulation strategy. It's not a build up a massive nest egg and live off of interest, right? It's earning and producing your returns from day one as a cash flow. And this is where I think it's really, really important. And maybe what I perceive as some of the reason behind the speakers that you've chosen and some of the guests that you put on your podcast as well, which is, as you build this income, it puts you in the position where what you're doing to earn your bread, it becomes now, one of those things where you don't have to do it. Now, it may take, depending on where a person's at, it may take you a while to build up that type of income, but it puts you in the position where that is really where the efficiency, the ideas, not necessarily chasing shiny objects, but you're pursuing something, whether it's a business or entrepreneurialism, or it's doing something that you wouldn't have to do. But most people are stuck in this rut of having to do certain things, and they get their rise, right, or their adrenaline flowing by the way they invest. And I would say if people
they're not most of those people aren't investors. Okay, they're speculators, they're gamblers. Investing at the end of the day, Pat, investing is the legitimate process of creating value over time. And the world's most famous investor is exactly that, Warren Buffett. That's exactly what he does. Okay. We just do it with a better asset class. Look, if you think you're going to be the Warren Buffett, what you got to realize is Warren Buffett is an insider. He's an activist. He's basically, in many ways, running these companies that he invests in. Okay. He shouldn't even be called an investor. He should be called an entrepreneur in a way, with income property, we apply that same kind of value investing concept to the most historically proven asset class in the world. And that's why it works. Okay. This is just the legitimate process of creating value over time. Everything else is gambling. It's speculation. It's not investing.
And then it goes to, finishing off my thought, it's more the purpose behind it, where investment isn't speculation. You hit the nail on the head there. And I would say it's what is that end result? And the end result, I would say, of those that have invested with you, I've invested with you. My philosophy has been figure out ways in which investments can get you to the point where you choose what you do, what you create as far as your day-to-day value. And I would say most people are in the rut of having to work, having to do something that they don't enjoy, and it's routine, it's mundane, and then they speculate and get their rise on making those type of investments that may crash, or they may go to the moon. And that's where I would say, it's a backwards approach, where wealth is basically creating this sense of freedom so you can go out and really produce with stuff that you like to do. And in a way, I would say it's helped me, to understand your philosophy. It's helped me as an investor to really understand what is my purpose, to not speculate. When I'm going to speculate on things that I can control, whether it's a marketing campaign or whether it's a book or whether it's an event, things where it wouldn't necessarily be an investment other than an investment in myself.
Because you get a twofold result from that. You learn something from it, right?
Absolutely.
And so even if the thing itself doesn't work out, you've learned a lesson. I don't want to say that you can never speculate, right? I speculate sometimes. I'm just saying that's not your core strategy. That's a sideline. If you have some wealth, then heck, you can use 10, 15, even 20% of it, depending on how much wealth you have. And you can gamble a little bit and speculate and, buy some Bitcoin and, have one property in a crazy market like South Florida before it goes down the tubes again. It shouldn't be your core strategy. If you have to follow your investments on a daily basis, then it's not an investment. Okay. That's just a speculation. Like if you're the person who is having lunch and you're walking out of the restaurant, you walk through kind of the bar area and there's a TV up there and it's got the report of the stock market on, or if you're checking your phone to check the market, that you're not investing. You're a speculator. You're a gambler.
No, and I would say at the end it is one of the things that we see eye to eye on many things, but this is where we really look at investing in a very similar way, because I speculate as well, not with investments. I get to see a lot of what people do with their money. It's bothersome to me, and I would say I understand why people are speculating, but I would argue to the ends of the earth, where if you have your foundation established, it's kind of like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you go through those rungs, those levels, and you try to go, right to self-actualization or right to, self-esteem without having shelter, without having food, without having a safe place
it's not going to work.
It's very similar with finance, where if that foundation is in place, now it puts you in the position of speculating, but doing so with what you said, doing so with a kind of a non-zero sum game, which is, you win. Whether you lose on the speculation or not, you win.
Yeah. But income property is a multidimensional asset class where you earn your returns from many different sources. Of course, capital gains, cash flow, that covers non-dividend paying stocks and dividend paying stocks. So it covers those two categories: gold, Bitcoin, that kind of stuff. Non-dividend paying, just pure speculation. And you have the income component, but you also have tax benefits. You have leverage. You have what I call inflation-induced debt destruction. Literally one of my own discoveries, right? And I made up that word for it, or that phrase for it. So you have these multi-dimensional ways in which you earn money. And a lot of people don't really know how to keep score with that stuff.
No, I agree. And that's where I would say education comes into play. And I would say your podcast is a great resource to do that. Meet the Masters is another good place to start. And then maybe the final thing that I would say, because I got some Halloween to do tonight. We're obviously recording this
trick or treating. Yeah. Well, hey, I've got my T-shirt on.
But what I would say is, as I look at events, right, and the conferences that I go to, there are a few benefits, and it depends on the event. But the benefit that I've seen with a lot of the events that I've attended recently isn't necessarily the content that is talked about on stage.
Right.
No, that's some of it. It's the interaction, and it's interaction based on a few dynamics. One is the interaction, seeing what other people are doing, which I would say gives people confidence, especially those that aren't full in, right? Those that may have their toe in the water. Right. That's the first thing, and then the second thing is you gain ideas and you brainstorm and you network. And you create connections which could be of value, whether it's from an investment standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a mastermind standpoint, whatever the case may be. But I would say it's not necessarily what happened on stage at the event that's the value.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
You're around and what that does to you as an individual, and especially this is in January, so it is one of the best ways to kick off your year, where your bar is raised a little bit, and you now have created, essentially some new expectations, hopefully, but they're not based on, what you did last year. They're maybe based on what you see as a possibility, given who you've interacted with, what you've seen done, and the possibilities created from that.
Pat, one of the things that we just announced on the podcast is a contest for the best 5-year plan. And we want listeners to submit a video to us or put it on YouTube and talk about their 5-year plan for building their portfolio and what their life will look like in 5 years.
That's awesome.
And I'll tell you something, what you were just mentioning about the importance of getting involved in a mastermind group, going to the right conferences is super important, because there are sort of two major elements in all of our lives. And this is a little bit esoteric maybe for some, and maybe some have heard this, but there's context and content, okay? And these are different things, right? Most people try to change their lives by working on the content. They rearrange some things, they buy a new car, they move to a new house, whatever. And that changes things a little bit. But if you want like real and lasting change, you've got to change the context of your life. And most of that context comes from the people we associate with. And, I'll tell you something, some of the biggest mistakes I've made in life is staying in my home or staying in my office and not getting out and meeting people. When you get out and meet people, especially at the right conferences and events, your whole context just grows. I mean, think about this. Fish live in water, right? But they probably, I don't know this for sure, they probably don't notice the water. Okay, because the water is just their context. We live in air, and hopefully we live in a city that's not too polluted, where we don't notice the air, right? We don't actually see it. But everything in our life is generated out of that context, that environment. And when we change our context, which mostly comes from our associations and the people we hang out with, and so when you come to meet the masters of income property, you're at lunch or you're at dinner and you're at a table with some investors that are doing some big things. And you realize, hey, this is just a normal person they're not far out of reach. They're just here, and I know them. They're just a regular person, and look at what they've accomplished. Then it changes your context for what you can accomplish. And that's huge. That just makes such a difference. Certainly you can get some of this by listening to podcasts, good audiobooks. Yes, absolutely. You can do that. But when you meet people in person, in a live setting, it really, that's where the big improvement comes.
No, and I agree, because I think in the end, really what the potential of a human being is, and you and I have talked about this, a ton on the podcast, on your podcast, where what is possible for a human being is beyond anything that we can imagine, right? Just look at what's happened in the last 50 years. But the idea is, why do people get stuck? And I think the stuck is because of their associations. And it's within those associations, the fear of looking bad, the fear of failing, the fear of looking bad because you failed.
Well, and it's the tall poppy syndrome. Many of our friends don't really want us to succeed. Okay. And so that means we got to get better friends, new friends that are, doing better things than we're doing. So
for sure. I caught myself, and maybe we'll end with this, but I caught myself this weekend and I was surprised. And again, it just shows, that your environment is so important. And so my kids, I always try to, with my kids, I try to create an environment where, they're safe, but they also are not afraid, and they're not afraid of, making a mistake. They're not afraid of telling the truth, which I think oftentimes the context of a family is not that. And so I said something to my almost 13-year-old, which I totally caught myself and was able to, rewind a little bit with her, which was, she wanted to, do this thing with a YouTube channel. And I was like, oh, Hannah, that's probably not possible for you. And I caught myself, I'm like, because I think kids these days are being told, by these older people that have no idea what the freak they're doing, that, they can't do certain things, that this is not possible, or that's not possible. And I think it ruins kids' lives, because kids get to this point where the context in which is created, right, is based on their peers, is based on, well, this is the way you have to do things. You got to go to school. You got to do this. You got to graduate. You got to get a job. And I think it ruins kids, because it removes that, it puts a ceiling on them. And
sure. It limits their context. Yeah. And certainly the public school system is a pathetic disaster. We all know that. It's just a terrible environment. The government needs to get out of the school business, because they suck at it. They need to get out a lot of businesses for sure. But that's a whole nother discussion. Yep. But yes, you're absolutely right. And if you look at, now Hannah is Generation Z, but if you look at Generation Y, okay, or the millennial generation, the most famous generation potentially in history, and the largest demographic cohort in American history, they've been catered to like no other generation in human history. I mean, they've had helicopter parents that have carted them around to every soccer game and everything. And it's just, it's, you got to take some risk and grow your context. That's the way you grow it. So.
All right, Jason. Well, hey, we can, this is the danger of you and I speaking, because we can go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm going to post some information about Meet the Masters on the show notes, as well as on social media, because
and a registration link, right, Pat?
And the registration that I was going to get to next. And you've given us permission for our audience to have a discount price plus the early bird special. So we're gonna post that. This is an event where, it's in a beautiful part of the world, beautiful part of the United States. It's in the perfect time, because it's cold in most places, but also from a time standpoint, the beginning of the year is the year in which you create your own context. So I think that there's going to be definitely some experiences that will do that for you. And so if you can get there, because you won't regret it.
And hey, visiting San Diego, La Jolla, California in the middle of January is probably nicer weather than wherever you live. So that's another good reason.
Probability that is accurate. Yeah, okay, Jason, it was awesome to have you on. I wish you a happy Halloween. Okay. And we'll talk to you soon.
Happy Halloween and happy investing.
You've been listening to the Wealth Standard Radio Show, your gold standard in everything financial.